When Gail became a mom to a son, she knew she wanted to raise him and parent him beyond the whole boys will be boys stereotype. She knew she wanted him to be raised knowing and understanding love, kindness, and respect, and so much more. So together, she sat down and chatted with her friend Ada Malone, and Gail and Ada together collected a bunch of essays written by some incredible contributors. Today, I have the opportunity of sitting down and speaking with Gail, Lalita, and Katherine to talk about this collection of essays called Boyhood Reimagined. It is truly a fascinating conversation that I know you don't want to miss. Welcome to the Becoming babyREADY podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. I have a really unique group of individuals with me today because we don't often have a collection of authors and book creators together to talk about a subject that I think is really important when we're talking about queer parenting. And so I want to say welcome to the three of you. Let me introduce Gail Schwarz, who is an editor for the most amazing book that you're ever going to find when it comes to talking about parenting boys as a queer parent. It is called Boyhood Reimagined. Gail, I'm going to welcome you. You've brought a couple of contributors with you. I'll ask you to introduce yourself and then tell us about who you've brought and why you've brought them here.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's so delightful that you invited us here to talk about the book, which is a very precious project to me personally. So my friend Ada Malone and I were both queer moms, and we both ended up with one son. And she was someone we were very, very close in the 90s. We shared a house. We were roommates. And she came out to me, or I was one of the first people she came out to. Like, we have a very, very long history as queer people being in relationship and being in close friendship. And so we happened to have these two little boys, and both of us were, we're feminists, we're artists, we're academics, we're activists. We have a lot of these sort of similar identities, and then suddenly we're thrust into this position where we've got these little boys and we didn't quite know what to do with them, and they were farting and waving sticks and wrestling and kind of behaving in ways that we just didn't quite know what to do with them. We would be calling each other and joking and kind of rolling our eyes and frustrated, and we started getting a little bit deeper into, as the boys got a little bit older, and asking really more significant questions around, well, how can we do this in a way that's going to help society, that's going to further our work and in the world. And those questions led us to explore the idea of doing a collection of essays. And we had both read a lot of other books by other women who had posed these same questions, like Peggy Drexler. And some of those questions had been kind of answered in the research. And, those questions were more straightforward, like, can queer women raise boys successfully? And the research was pretty clear. Yes, they can. They do actually, in some ways, a better job. So our questions started becoming a little bit more nuanced and more sophisticated. So that was the impetus. And then we put out a call for submissions, and we met people as wonderful as Lalita and Katherine. And our kind of model for the book was more as a community rather than two editors kind of making all the decisions. And we really wanted to kind of include people. And so both Katherine and Lalita were there from the early days, several years ago. And we would have meetings and talk about things like, how do we use language in the call for submission so that it was more inclusive towards people who didn't relate as women or as sons or as mothers. You know, those terms were very problematic, and we talked and wrestled and discussed around, you know, the call for submissions was a big thing. So
Mhm.
we worked as a team with that. And then we were also looking to involve a more diverse group of people and to have interviewees and people who weren't necessarily writers. And both Katherine and Lalita were also involved in those early days. And then fast forward to now, we've been working as a team to promote the book and to get the word out. And again, these two fabulous humans have been there in every aspect of the word there. So I'm just deeply grateful and honored to have them here. And maybe we can just have both Lolita and Katherine introduce themselves for your listeners.
Absolutely. Lalita, do you want to start? You jumped on the call first, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Lalita Duperon. I live in the Bay Area. I was a single mother by choice, and that's an enormously important part of my identity that I chose this journey by myself when I was in my late 30s or my mid 30s, I guess, when it started, and realized that wanting to be a mom was really important to me. There's some a trauma attached to that that I won't go into here in the podcast. But I struggled with the desire because it felt so heteronormative. It felt so patriarchal. Ultimately, the purpose of women is to be moms, blah, blah, blah. And there I was feeling that so viscerally, not the purpose part, but the wanting to have a child part. And that needs was more important than being in a partnership. It just wasn't really relevant, to be honest, and remains irrelevant. I have been partnered in my son is 18 now. In my life, I'm very happily partnered now, though we don't live together. As Meghan Markle would say, yet. But being a queer mom and being a single mom for me almost felt like going together. Like, so I really got to rewrite the narrative in all the ways. And I'm immensely proud of having done that. I'm not sure how successful I've been. I guess we have to see how things go. Um, but um, I did it. I did it, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm incredibly grateful to Gail for having this opportunity to write about it and talk about it and have this platform now to just. I've always been very, very open about being a single mother by choice because on my other life is in the space of higher education. And so I see a lot of younger women who are nowhere near these decisions, but will hit these decisions. And especially in the academy, if you are going to do a PhD, etc., the time crunch becomes enormously important. And so late 30s, early 40s, that's kind of when you're done with your work. And now this question comes up, do I want to have a child or not? Do I have a partner or not? And so I'm always like, when you're 18, start thinking about whether this is something you might want to do by yourself. Get your head out of the expectation that that requires. I still hear people say that, in my age group, are you grandparent? Never mind mother-in-law. That's say, oh, my children aren't married. And I'm like, how is that the reply? This is irrelevant. Please, people, let's move on from that. And so I think it's really important for me that younger women who are in my kind of sphere are aware of that as an option. You can do this by yourself. Is it easy? No. Is it possible? Absolutely, yes.
It's so true. So true.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and like Lalita, I am an elective single mother. And let's see, I was unlike Lolita. I wasn't partnered in my 30s and lamented that a little bit. And I don't know how to say this quickly. Anyway, I really wanted to become a mother and I acted on that desire and I now have three children. My oldest just turned 13. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I had to think about how my identity as an elective single mother corresponded to a queer identity. And I think it does in the way that Lalita was explaining that when you start out parenting this way, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever you are, if you're doing it singly, that in some ways is as much a violation of norms or expectations, I think, as doing so in a queer partnership. It raises different questions or it butts up against different sets of conventions. In any case, I don't know if it's more or less, it doesn't really matter, but it certainly raises eyebrows. And I think it opens up possibilities of doing family that are not available to partnered people in any way, just as being in partnership, queer partnership allows us to think about how we do relationships because you just can't fall back on hetero norms.
Mhm.
So I have been thinking lately about, or not lately, for a long time, but especially lately about how raising boys as women identified people, what that opens up, what it makes possible. The role of mentoring recently has popped up because of work we've done around this book. And yep, that's I think an interesting thing to talk about if it comes up later.
Mhm. I think that that is an important point. The question that I've been asked, and I'm very confident that the three of you have been asked at different points in your parenting journey is, well, who's the male influence then? How, how did they learn how to be boys if you are queer, if you don't have a male role model living in the house? I mean, that isn't to say that there are not there are thousands of cisgendered heterosexual women, not single parents by choice. It's not the elective decision that they've made, but by circumstance, by happenstance, their partner is away on business for extended periods of time or is on, some kind of a mission across the ocean or has died. And those people are still raising their sons without a man in the house. And people don't seem to question them the same way because they have that parentage that they can fall back on. Is that is that a comment that you've heard frequently? And is that a piece of the puzzle that gets addressed in the book?
I'll start with my response, but I'm curious about the book because I don't fully remember. So I'll pass over to Gail for that. But I resist the question, and I think the existence of the question is the problem, actually. And so we are forced to answer the question because the question exists.
Mhm.
But the question reifies gender. It reifies the patriarchal structure, heteronormative, the couple, and it completely misses the idea that you can be all things and you can also be no things. Like what are the boxes that need to be ticked that a father ticks and a mother ticks? And then how many of us look back on our childhoods and see those boxes ticked? It's so the question, I think, is the problem. But yes, we get it all the time. And I have to admit, with some, I don't know quite what the right word is, but as some discomfort, I guess, that when my son was little, I was worried about that. I didn't have a ton of men in my life, and I was like, well, but that seems to be important because everybody kept going on about it. And then, as my thinking evolved and also as my parenting evolved,
Mhm.
no, I can be all of it. So when you said, when you posed the question earlier, like, where's the male influence? I raised my hand, like, here, it's right here. With me, you might actually want to ask, where's the female influence? That in terms of how society defines these things
Mhm.
and very problematic, right? So, but yes, it's very hard to have to deal with that question. And I wish when I was younger, when I was first a mom, I would have been stronger to say, I reject the question. I'm not answering it. But that's hard.
It is hard. And I want to say that this many years later and this many years into my parenting journey, there are times, even though my children are grown adults, where I have to decide, do I feel like having an argument with this person that I don't really know and say, I reject that question? Or do I just smile and nod and turn away and start a conversation somewhere else because I don't want to get into it? And
Yeah.
it shouldn't be that way.
I'm going to just jump in. I think it's really, really tough to be on the other side of that question. I'm also going to say there's some validity to needing role models. We all need role models. I mean, I would have loved to have grown up with someone who was an artist in the home, and I didn't have that. We find those in other places, and I think one of the problems in the way that our society is set up is the nuclear family, and that we're just not in direct contact with a lot of adults. I mean, I think if you imagined us in a more traditional society where the extended family and the village and the tribe and everybody, you'd find someone who was like you.
Right.
Like that person would be in your immediate circle. And that I think is more the issue, rather than, oh, somebody of my particular gender doesn't happen to be in my house. And in the collection, which is so wonderful, Robin Lowy's son, Sam Waterstone, wrote the foreword, and
Right.
he was raised by two mothers, and he was asked that question all the time, he and his brother, and he would always say, no, we have the best of both worlds. We have these two awesome feminist moms who have different interests and different skills, and one plays basketball with us and one takes us out for camping, and we have all that, and we have our friends' fathers and men we see on TV, and like there's plenty of people in the world. We don't need someone living in our home to show us X, Y, and Z.
That's very true. And I did love that piece from the forward as I read it. At the same time, I I I mean, I love knowing that as he's grown, that's been how he has seen it and how it has shaped for him. Because truly, at the core of it, as a parent, that's what we want for our kids to feel is that security and who cares. But at the same time, as parents, we can't shake that out of our heads. And maybe the next generation of parents will have less of that shaking. I mean, to be 100% honest, I quite I do from the gay men that I speak to and I record with. I mean, they get the same question about female role models, and so many of them have almost been conditioned to call a surrogate the mother, even though she has no role in the child's life or just sees them intermittently because they've maintained a connection. But I feel almost like they are more criticized by the world as a whole for trying to fill what is considered a maternal role by parenting than than single moms or queer moms do. Don't get me wrong. I think everybody gets labeled when you're not cis het, then you all get labeled and it's slapped up there for everybody. And it's just wrong. At the end of the day, it's just wrong. We should be trying to support. But how many people do you know that are queer as adults now, and we all appear to be close to being women of a certain age who grew up not seeing any queer representation anywhere ever? How did I learn to be a lesbian? I don't know. Right?
Yeah, and I would love for the message to be, we need more adults in our children's lives collectively. Let's
100%.
bring let's like come together as a community
Yeah.
and be those role models for all of our kids, because all of our situations and families are different and all of our kids' needs are different, and there might be some young boy who really wants to latch on to a man, and why can't that person be in the community, and let's have more of those options available to our children.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I just wanted to jump in quickly on this. I found maybe this is ironic, I'm not sure, but I have more men in my life now because they want to have some kind of relationship with or they have good relationships with my children, my two sons and my daughter, than I ever had before I had children. And these are healthy, modeling relationships. They're not modeling masculinity per se. They're modeling how to be a grown up in the world in different ways. And I know that, or I'm pretty certain that my life, my emotional capacities, my bandwidth would not have allowed for these relationships to exist, for these people to be a part of my kids' lives if I were partnered. So that's where I think that the single part, however you define single, because that's also kind of complicated, but that my openness, and it wasn't because I was actively seeking, though I certainly got the question, how are your boys going to learn to be men from my family members? And I dealt with that in different ways. So I haven't sought these men. They're just there and fabulous. And they're not having a man in the house. I really liked, Sam, your the way that you put that. What does it mean for a kid to grow up without a man living in the house? It's a different framing that invites this discussion. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
You raise a good point. And one of the things that I actually found very insightful from what you said that I hadn't considered was when you're single, you make all of the decisions. That's not easy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to suggest that all of the weight of all of that doesn't carry heavy on your shoulders a lot of the time. I'm confident that it does. But you're also not putting that up against trying to take into consideration the different parenting styles of a partner or an ex-partner or a co-parent that also need to be factored in to help you navigate those pieces. So then you do get to pick and choose who's in your child's life, in your children's lives to help ameliorate their world and strengthen it and build it up. And so it's a piece I hadn't taken into consideration, but it's very true. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back.
Gaddies. We're the first brand made by and for gay dads, built to celebrate the families we've created. Our tees, hats, and hoodies aren't just clothes. They're conversation starters, connection makers, and reminders that you're part of a bigger community. Whether you're at the playground, the pride parade, or owning the dance floor, Gaddies make sure that you feel seen and celebrated. Find us at HEYGADDIES.com and on Instagram at HEYGADDIES. Gaddies, because every dad deserves his moment.
What was the one thought you're thinking when I'm putting together this piece that I'm contributing to the book? I can't wait to talk about. Everybody's smiling, but nobody's saying much.
I can say, like, my son was obsessed. I mean, I can read a passage, but he was obsessed when he was a toddler with implements of women's work. Like, he was obsessed with the vacuum cleaner and the salad spinner and the dustpan and like I was just it was so ironic. It just tickled my funny bone. So I decided, this was a while ago before this collection came into existence because it's an older essay, but just this irony of this little boy growing up with these two women. I was married to my ex-wife at the time, and how obsessed he was with these tools that I just wanted to throw out because I hate all that stuff. I don't want to friggin' clean the house and spin salad and I hate all that stuff, but he was like gaga over it. So it's just the irony and the humor, that's the humor part of my writing is very strong. So that I was very excited to share that.
Yeah. Well, Katherine, you put your hand up too, that you have a thought.
I had I have lunch with colleagues who, four women who are mothers. They are, well, three of them are married to men. One of them is single, with different people. And we were having conversations about parenting our children, and I found myself getting really heated and frustrated. And so I was excited to be able to make the argument that I wanted to make at those dinners in this piece because it wouldn't have been appropriate to do at the dinners. And my piece is about teaching, helping boys to see the invisible labor that we do every day, that everybody does. I mean, grown-ups do every day, most grown-ups. And it specifically how that labor supports not only their playing, but also they're getting really good at whatever it is that they do. So I was thinking specifically about my friends' sons who do high echelon soccer. and how she said they hire a nanny who comes in and gets them off to school and then cleans up the house so that by the time they get home, they have to do their homework and they've been at soccer wherever for 4 hours and they're really excellent soccer players. And she loves to talk about their accomplishments. They're enormously talented. And I thought these boys, I don't think have any idea about everything that is going into supporting their excellence. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. And so I jumped at the chance in this collection to do that.
Yeah.
I love that, Catherine. Yeah. Mine was really about, I mean, I'm always about humor, Sam, and mine was really about the absurdity of it all. And however well-intentioned we are, then there's this thing called the world, right? That just pushes back on everything that we try to stand for. But we also ourselves are so complicated and, well, I can't speak for other people, but I'm, just such a bundle of contradictions. And so the kind of culminating piece of my part of my essay is when my son walks in on me when he's little, when I'm shaving my legs, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to explain this now? And so I give him some kind of feminist blah. I think that in a way, I love that particular anecdote because it really sums up my parenting. Like I say one thing, but I kind of do something else, but also, this is really important for you to think about, but also, sometimes you do need it tomorrow. So we go to Amazon Prime, but, capitalism and like these constant conversations. And he calls me out all the time now, which I just love. Nothing makes me happier than when he calls me out.
That so reminds me of so many conversations I've had with my own children over the years. I mean, even little things like, no, you can't have the cookies. That's just not a good thing. But as soon as they're out of sight, standing in the corner eating the cookies, like, we are constant contradictions, both good and bad, I think.
Those cookies are definitely from mom, yes.
But even my oldest son, as I was getting ready this morning, putting on a different shirt and a little bit of lip gloss, and I have earrings on. What are you doing, Mom? Why are you doing that? You're talking about your ideas, so why are you doing that? And I am very minimalist when it comes to any kind of uh, preparation in this way. But I appreciated him asking and noting that which he has, how other people in our life, men, grown men, don't seem to do all of the stuff that he sees the grown-up women in his life doing, even minimally. Uh, so just that sensibility, I think, is a step forward. And we're conditioned that I shave my legs too. So what can I say?
It is a conditioning though. And then we adopt it as our own because it's part of what becomes making us feel the way that we like to feel, right? And so yes, society's told us to feel this way, and no, society shouldn't have done that. Now I've adopted that as part of who I am. And so I have to let myself then embrace it. If I'm going to shave my legs or put on makeup or put on jewelry because it makes me feel better about how I'm presenting myself to the world, then I need to let myself embrace it. Just like we were just talking about this the other day, a couple of friends and I love going to the mall or something like that and seeing young women dress the way that I wish I had the courage to dress.
Mm.
Because I feel like we are making some evolution. So, society is letting us kind of move forward in that, but it's a slow burn. It's a long time to take. So now the next generation of young boys needs to understand that we need to still respect all of that, whether we choose to put on the makeup or we choose to wear something really big and baggy or tight and comfortable. Like, it's a big adjustment to match our parenting with where the world is starting to shift as well.
Yeah.
Parenting's not for the faint of heart.
Like, on one hand, I mean, I think especially as a queer parent, like it's so intentional. And then it's also like, you just kind of do it because it's right in front of you. And so the number one thing people still now say to me is, I don't know how you do it. And I have two responses to that. One, when I look at like straight couples, married, partnered, whatever, I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Because now there's this other person that you have to deal with all the time. And the other response is, I'm not doing it. It's just kind of happening. I don't know. I mean, of course, I play a role in it, but I mean, so much of we just make it up as we go along, don't we? I mean, it's the truth, people.
It's true. It's true.
You can edit that out if you don't want this.
No, it's true.
We're all just winging it.
We're winging it. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, and I think the message too that it's parenting, also this trope that parenting is difficult. Yes, I think parenting is very difficult. I also think that that plays into we could ask why we talk about it that way or why we experience it that way, and that opens up other questions. Um, but putting on the table that it's difficult in different ways for so many reasons, and making those reasons or having the central axis for that difficulty being you have a devoted partner, preferably of the opposite gender, is just missing the mark in so many ways that's why I find that quick off the cuff comment, oh my gosh, how do you do it? And I think, oh, well, I have tenure, I have money in the bank, I live in a really nice place, I am working toward owning my home. That's how I do it. How does this other person with whatever set of factors do it? So yeah, the question is really irritating. One other thing about the shaving legs, not to beat a dead horse, but one of my good friends here is devoutly Christian, used to be on evangelical. Now she's a different kind. She's 33 and she doesn't shave her legs. And her son is my middle son's age, and they're really good friends. And I just think this is interesting. She comes from this very different tradition from mine, and yet she's modeling in some ways in this minor way, but it's actually, I think, significant. She doesn't shave her underarms or her legs, and a different kind of womanhood. So anyway, I think this stuff is pretty cool.
Good for her.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, good for her. Gail, as you were putting stories together, what was the criteria that you gave contributors like Lalita and Katherine when you said, I'm looking for submissions, this is what I'm asking you to give me?
We started out fairly simply, and we got more progressively complicated as we went along, because we were getting questions like, well, what is a mother? If I don't relate as a woman, am I a mother? So we really had to work on that. The one thing that we were very interested in is when the gender of the parent or parents was different in a particular hierarchical way from the gender of the son. So we really wanted parents who identified as mom with children who identified as son.
Right.
And we just said, if you relate that way and your children relate that way, that's good enough for you. There's no, show us your mother card at the, when you submit your essay. That was not a criteria. And then we had a bunch of questions about, how does feminism impact your parenting? I actually don't remember the specific questions, but they were just to get people thinking about the topic. And we were mostly very, very interested in people's concrete experiences. I think when it comes to essays like that, oftentimes people get into the theoretical, and we were really looking for stories. We really wanted storytelling with the theoretical and the reflection piece, but we wanted other queer women with sons or whoever to read about what is it like to do this. What does it look like on the ground? What happens in daily life? And with all of the mess and complication and inconsistency, there was a lot of people, a lot of the moms talked about nurturing their son's emotional intelligence and well-being. That was a real consistent thread. I want my son to be comfortable with all of his feelings and to honor his feelings and to express his feelings and to feel confident in the tender parts of himself as well as the more traditionally stereotypically masculine, and to feel comfortable with his whole self. That was very, I think almost everyone talked about some aspect of that in their essays. I think
Really good prompts. Those questions, they weren't really questions, they were prompts. And so they helped
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
way to write. And then the other thing that is, I think, really relevant here is that you were looking for feminist queer moms. And I have met so many queer coupled women who are not feminist in an intentional way. And I think, again, it's a kind of a patriarchal assumption that just because people aren't heteronormative, whatever that may feel like to the person using that phrase, they're therefore revolutionary in some way. And I guess by their very existence they are. But if that intentionality doesn't go into parenting, then you can just reify the patriarchy with two lesbian moms. It's easily done. And I've seen it done. Like two moms telling their daughter, oh, don't give that pink thing to my son because, he won't want that. And I'm like, no, we do want that.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so I think Gail, your emphasis on feminism early on really helped shape the volume in a very particular way that I'm incredibly grateful for, actually.
Yeah, thanks for that. Because it's so baked into the concept, I almost forget to put. But you're right. There are, and just like there's many lesbians or queer women in general who don't necessarily relate to any sort of political identity.
It's interesting that you say that. As I mentioned, I was a women's studies student in university and have always had feminism at my core, and to the point that when I gave birth to my eldest, I had not found out during pregnancy what the sex of the baby was going to be. And I didn't love my obstetrician to begin with, and I think he knew that. He probably felt much the same way about me. I don't really care, but my son came out, and I was excited to meet my daughter. And he said, "You have a beautiful baby boy." And I said, "Are you sure?" And he looked at me, and my partner at the time looked at me, and I was like, "Yeah, we're sure." I was so convinced that I was so deeply entrenched in the role of being a feminist and all things feminine that my body would just reject the idea of birthing anyone assigned male at birth. And that was clearly not the case. The universe had a different path for me, I guess, and thought, oh, this is what you need to learn. And I've had the opportunity then to be able to learn, but it's been quite an evolution from that moment.
And actually, Sam, I'm really happy that you said that because that was something else that came up both in the essays, and also I've done some video. I did taping of some video interviews with several of the participants to help promote the book. And one of the compilations I did was your reaction when you first found out that you were going to have a book, and it runs the gamut. And there was a lot of grief actually among a lot of the women saying, I cried, or I was devastated. I didn't, I mean, it wasn't around, it wasn't everyone, but like you, I had that same thing. Like, I couldn't imagine having a boy. It's like, what am I going to do with a boy? I just hadn't been around. I grew up with a sister, I had a few friends who were male but mostly my world was girls and women. And again, I grew up in a different time where non-binary wasn't an option. So it really was, my world was girls and women. So then I had this boy suddenly, and
It was so the opposite for me. And I think we did an interview, Gail, so that's probably out there somewhere. Um, I so always felt, I think after I came out in particular, the violence that had been kind of perpetrated against me as a person seen as female by the world, like the fat shaming, the tall shaming, all of it. And I was never a good girl in that way. I was never like I did ballet as a child. I was so desperately wanting to be like this girl, and then I wanted to be a flight attendant. Like all these things that you're supposed to want as a person who's female in this world. And I was so scared of like hurt people that if I have a girl, am I just gonna ultimately like just do to her what was done to me by lots of people, and so I really wanted a boy, but it was, and so I didn't find out the gender because I was so worried if I would find out that I'd be like upset, exactly what you described, Gail. I just didn't want to feel that because ultimately I wanted to have a baby. That was the thing I wanted. Like I wanted to be a mom, so it was really about me. But yeah, it was so interesting to hear all these stories of women being so confused about their feelings around having a boy when that's really what I wanted. Because I thought then it's a blank slate. Then I cannot kind of I can and that's not actually true, of course, because ultimately we're human beings raising other human beings. But that's what it felt like, at least.
Yeah. And actually, my PS to that is that my son's 15 now, and when I think back on it, if I had had a girl, I don't think I don't think it would have gone nearly as well as it's gone. That my trauma has not, I have not passed my trauma on specifically because there was a break in that. The violence that I experienced was with my mother. So there was a very different dynamic that I think was key, the fact that my son's gender was different than mine.
Well, that's actually an interesting point. One of the things that I also came to my mind as you were talking was I specifically didn't find out the sex of my baby during pregnancy, and because I didn't want to know at the time. For me, I wanted it to be a surprise, and I thought it was a shoo-in that it was going to be a girl anyway. But as someone who's been a birth worker for as many years, I've attended the births of hundreds of babies and supported thousands of families on the path. And the advice that I will always give to someone when they're talking about going to have an ultrasound and finding out the sex of their baby is, whether or not that will change their feelings about the pregnancy. Because when you don't know until the moment the child is born, you're just grateful the child is here, you've birthed them, they're healthy, you're okay. You don't let yourself typically, I can't say universally, but typically you don't let yourself kind of mired in the, oh, well, that's not the sex that I thought it was going to be, or now I've got two of the same sex, and those kinds of things that can come to your mind. But when you find out partway through the pregnancy, then all you have is time to wait and worry about, will I be able to parent this child the way that I want to parent this child? Will I know enough about how to parent the child? If you already have a child, now it's another one of the same sex or it's the opposite sex. And so is that going to be a good fit or a bad fit? I think I understand that many people find out the sex of the baby. And I keep using that word very specifically because I hate the idea of gender reveal parties. You can't reveal someone's gender, they reveal it to you. But that's a whole other conversation. But there are so many people that tie so much into the sex of the child, and they find out because they can, and everybody asks them, oh, do you know yet? Do you know yet? But I feel like that's an awful lot of pressure. And we could just, if we didn't tell people, we could just ease that pressure so significantly for so many people in a lot of areas if there is already a pre-worry that's there.
Yeah, I hated that question. They're like, "Do you know what you're having?" And I'm like, "I think it's a baby." And then because people then get confused by you saying, "Well, I don't know, and I don't really want it. I don't really care." And I mean, I did care a little, but exactly what you just said, Sam, that was so powerful. Like, how is this going to change your feeling? Because all you have is time, and that's not good to be. You're in your head enough, kind of thing. But the other thing that then bothered me is people say, "Well, as long as it's healthy, right?" And actually, no.
Mm.
This baby will be my baby, loved no matter what. And just because society has an issue with disability is framed by society doesn't mean that that will impact how I feel about the, or how desirable this child is. And I don't want to, this is hard in the United States to talk about that topic, like, but people should do whatever they want with their fetuses. We're clear on that. I just want to be very, very clear where I'm coming from. But for me, that was never a consideration because the as long as it's healthy narrative is incredibly ableist and it's very what's the word? It's all around. Ubiquitous. There you go.
Mhm.
I can do hard words.
Catherine, did you know for yours?
I was just thinking about that. I did, and my answer about three is too long for now, but I was just thinking about, Sam, what you said. I I didn't want to know with my first, but I went to the 12-week scan or whatever it was with the woman who's had sold me her leftover sperm. And so we were developing some kind of relationship. Anyway, she was there. She wanted to know. The text said, I know the sex. I can tell you. I shook my head. She shook her head. Yes. He told her. Then my mom and my other mom wanted to know. And then I ended up finding out that I was having a boy. I don't think, in a way, what I was thinking was it was helpful for me to know because I could pick a name.
Mm.
It helped me rather than being this mystery that then I was getting angsty about. It was more, oh, this person.
Mm.
But of course, the sex, that's very, I'm making all kinds of assumptions about what his being born with a penis was going to mean for who he was and what our relationship was going to be. And a lot of that is actually not the case with him. He's not, in many respects, he's not a typical boy. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And with the other two, the different situations, and people said, because I had a son, that my second is the son, oh, did you want a girl? And I don't know. And now I guess I'll say without being able to go into it, it is interesting to see my three children unfold and how I do bring gender, my lens of understanding them and the relationship that I have with my daughter. Feels, it does feel different to me how we relate. I've always had more women, close relationships with women in my life. Uh, yeah, nature versus nurture. I don't know. It is interesting to see live action in my particular familial pod.
For sure. I'm not going to keep the three of you too much longer, but because I have three parents sitting chatting with me, I'm going to ask you each to please tell me what is your very favorite part of parenting your children?
I don't know if this answers the question, but my favorite part of being around my son is seeing him be his own person.
Hmm.
And I don't know whether that's as a result of or completely in contradiction to my parenting. Who only knows? Like I sometimes wanted to say to him, when I told you to question all authority, I did not mean mine. That was the footnote.
100%. I get that.
And sinker and questions me all the time, and I love it. I love that he is that person. So that part.
I love it.
I think for me, it's the deep satisfaction of the work that I've done to break generational trauma, and then seeing how I deal with a situation, how my parents dealt with me. I'm doing it differently with my son. Like, for example, I can be a reactive person and I can yell, like many parents. And my son, at one point when he was like 9 or 10, he was telling a lot of lies, and it was very distressing because we're normally very, very honest, and so we had a conversation, and he said, I'm lying because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want you to yell at me. So we strategized, and we came up with a phrase that he could use: please don't be mad at me. So when he's in that moment where he knows he's going to say something I don't like, and he's like, do I say the truth? And he has that phrase, it's ready, and we don't really need it anymore because he's older and he just says whatever the thing was, and I'm less reactive. But the interesting part was when we talked about that, like he said that phrase, and it's like I switched something in my brain, and I didn't get mad at him. I mean, it was just crazy that you can, because you think you can't turn your anger off that quickly, but well, actually you can, or at least I could. So just that was one out of many examples where, I could see that, yeah, in this particular lineage, we've made some progress, and to feel like I had a part in that.
I need to get that turn the anger off phrase. There are lots of answers, but one that comes to mind is I love witnessing on a day-to-day basis at their most vulnerable when they first wake up in the morning, these people who are unfolding. And it's why I think that was part of my maternal desire, was that I wanted to have that intimate and close relationship with an unfolding human being that isn't thought out. They're just at their rawest. And it's fascinating. It can be frustrating, but it's beautiful. And so that's one of the many things I love about being a mother.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you. I want to take a moment and just thank the three of you for sitting here with me today and chatting about your experience as parents, your contributions to the book, and just the energy you put into the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your podcast and for all the work. My doula is somebody I love, maybe even more than my child. Like, doulas really do God's work on earth, and thank you for your work. Really, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. And if for people listening, if you're interested in the book, I would encourage you to go to my publisher's site rather than Amazon, to go to motinabooks.com, and you can order Boyhood Reimagined right there.
And that'll be in the show notes.
One of my favorite reviews is "This is a book for everyone." I love that review so much. So however you identify, read this book, right? That's
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it. And as I say, it'll all be in the show notes, so any listener can find ways to find this amazing resource. Thank you.
Thanks.
As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials, who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable pasts and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.